views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting groups. If you'd like to produce a show, call us at 260-421-1250.
Let me be your lighthouse so I can show you the way. Let me be your shining light, I'll keep you from drifting away. I'm the one that makes you try when
377-3003, United States of America versus Leonard Peltier.
Judge Benson, there is no doubt in my mind or my people's you are going to sentence me to 2 consecutive life terms. You are and have always been prejudiced against me and any Native Americans who have stood before you. You have openly favored the government all through this trial, and you are happy to do whatever the FBI would want you to do in this case.
Judge Benson misused his power by suppressing important evidence of FBI threats to witnesses and of FBI perjury, and by admitting as evidence fabrications by the FBI.
Your conduct during this trial leaves no doubt that you will do the bidding of the FBI without any hesitation, and I now firmly believe you will impose consecutive life terms solely because that's what you think will avoid the displeasures of the FBI.
Throughout this trial, there has been a consistent failure by the court to allow into evidence things which are permitted under the federal rules of evidence.
Each time my defense team tried to expose FBI misconduct in their investigation of this lawsuit and tried to present evidence of this, you claimed it was irrelevant to this trial. You were unwilling to allow for even the slightest possibility that a law enforcement officer could lie on the stand. Then how could you possibly be impartial enough to let my lawyers prove how important it is to the FBI to convict a Native American activist in this case?
I'd like to say that I'm a little appalled that whether you're Indian or black, purple, or red, or what you are, that you would allow our judicial system to treat anyone in the United States, a citizen of the United States, in the manner that he's been treated.
They hid the fact that Leonard's gun, the gun they say belonged to Leonard, did not match any of the components at the so-called murder scene.
I stand before you as a proud man. I feel no guilt. I have done nothing to feel guilty about. I have no regrets of being a Native American activist. Thousands of people in the United States, Canada, and around the world have and will continue to support me to expose the injustice that occurred in this courtroom.
The government can fabricate a case against someone, get a conviction, that even when you're then later able to prove that that case was fabricated, the government's allowed to switch its trial theory. And so even if you can then prove that the government fabricated a case against you and targeted you politically, you can't get a new trial. It's terrifying.
I honestly believe that you made up your mind long ago that I was guilty and that you were going to sentence me to the maximum sentence permitted under the law. This does not surprise me because you are a high-ranking member of the white racist American establishment which has consistently said, "In God we trust," while they went about the business of murdering my people and attempting to destroy our culture. The only thing I'm guilty of, in which I was convicted for, was of being Chippewa and Sioux blood.
Hello, this is Patty Hunter of Patty's Page. Welcome to my show. We're doing an interview with Mr. Sheridan Murphy, who is the president, or still is the president of International Leonard Peltier Defense Committee. And we're going to be talking about Leonard Peltier and what has happened to him and why it happened and how we can try to get him out of prison. So we'll see you in a moment with Mr. Sheridan Murphy and with Terry Doran, my other guest on TV. This is Patty Hunter of Patty's Page, and we have two guests on our show. First one on the laptop is Sheridan Murphy, who's the president, International Leonard Peltier Defense Committee. And on the phone is Mr. Terry Doran. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have questions for you, Sheridan.
Yes.
Yeah, wow. You got a lot of titles behind you, kid.
Sound and fury signifying nothing, really.
Well, you know, Sheridan, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Vermilion, South Dakota. I was raised both out there, and then we moved to help my mom's mom, my grandmother, out. We moved to Miami, Florida when I was a teenager. So I lived in both of those locations, which was an interesting cultural difference between the two, and both population-wise and demographics and all of those kind of things, which probably helped shape my view of the world, I guess, in a way.
Do you belong to a tribe?
I am not an enrolled member. My dad was a Lakota. I never looked to see if it was eligible for enrollment. I figured, I didn't grow up on the res, and I lived out here in an urban area. So you can call me a lineal descendant, a non-enrolled member, whatever the heck you want. Doesn't hurt my feelings.
And how old were you when you moved to Florida?
14.
14. So you went to, who mentored you as you were growing up? Who mentored you, influenced you?
There was a lot of different people that I kind of would talk to as mentors. I mean, of course you have your parents, and my grandfather on my mom's side. My dad was orphaned as a child.
Wow.
But my mom's parents were around. I also did a friend Aaron Two Elk, who was an American Indian member, who was someone who helped me formulate my, whatever you want to call it, my brain, my thoughts, my worldview, as both a young man and as a young adult.
In schools, where did you go? Did you go to...
I went to high school in Miami. After graduation, I actually, I've gained a lot of weight over the years, but as a young man, I was fit and trim and ran track and got a scholarship and went to the University of South Dakota and was out there for several years. Graduated and came down here and had the wild-eyed, harebrained idea I was going to go to law school and tried in the interim. I took classes at the University of South Florida, which is here in Tampa.
When did you become interested in Indian rights and why?
I think I was always aware of it, even as a young child. I mean, the liberation of Wounded Knee happened. I was 8 years old, so I was cognizant of it. I was a shy, introverted kid. I was born premature. I kind of kept to myself as a kid. And it was Aaron and some other people that let me know I had talents, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, that could work in Indian rights, because I was always interested in it. And actually one of my goals as a young man was to go into law school and go after Indian rights through the legal avenue. And I got sidetracked. as a young man and let the activist route instead.
Terry, do you have a question?
Well, I just wondered, when did you become involved with Leonard's case?
I was becoming involved with people that were involved in the American Indian movement when I was in college, the first at the USD. It was the time of the Yellow Thunder occupation, and I met a bunch of people, some of them famous, some of them not so famous. And I became more aware of Leonard. I think I was aware of Leonard before that. And after moving to Florida, and I'll just backtrack, I got involved in some actions for Leonard prior to that, but there were other organizers, and basically all I did was hold a sign, and say, "Free Leonard." When I moved to Florida and we actually started building organizations, and I was part of the group that made ideas happen, and whatever you want to call it, leadership, or the few that actually do things, or whatever you want to call those people. We actually would foment or come up with ideas for demonstrations and coordinating with the Defense Committee, which has gone through some matriculations over the years. Back then it was Lisa Ferrulo and Michelle Nola, I think it was right. And we would coordinate with them and actually formed all the support groups that existed in Florida at that time.
Could you just sum up briefly what happened at Pine Ridge that Leonard is serving a life sentence for? He's accused of killing 2 FBI agents. Is that right?
Yes, he's accused of killing 4 FBI agents.
And this was a time when there was a lot of unrest in that area in Pine Ridge. And the first question is, what were all those agents doing there in the first place? They had no business there. So it almost looked like it was an sort of thing. But anyway, if you could just sum up a little bit for Patty's viewers. Some people may not know.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point, because you probably have viewers that aren't familiar with Leonard's case. Basically, if you look at the aftermath of the liberation of Wounded Knee, Pine Ridge had become kind of an armed camp with 2 factions. You had the traditional people who followed traditional Lakota ways, who were backed by the American Indian movement, and you had people that were more assimilated, for lack of a better word, who were backed by the FBI. And there were some 60-odd murders, mostly of AIM members and supporters, most of which have not been investigated by the FBI to this day. But in that atmosphere of shootings and murders, and they actually had a higher murder rate on Pine Ridge in the early 70s than cities like Detroit or Baltimore or New Orleans. They had a higher murder rate. And the Federal Bureau of Intimidation was on the reservation backing the assimilated people through something called the Guardians of the Oglala Nation. They actually called themselves Goons, which is ironic. And those were the people doing most of the violence on the reservation. And in that atmosphere, a group of Northwest AIM people, including Leonard, his cousin Bob Robidoux, and some other Dino Butler, and a group of other people came on to Pine Ridge and built an encampment at the Jumping Bull Farm near Oglala to protect that community. And they were doing that through, they were chopping wood, they were hauling water. In this COVID crisis, I think it's important for your viewers to realize 86% of the places in the United States that don't have running water are Indian reservations. And you're supposed to wash your hands. In that atmosphere, that's what was going on. They built an encampment. There was a young man by the name of Jimmy Eagle, who was accused of, along with one of the Poirier brothers, I don't remember which one, off the top of my head, that went and took a rancher's boots. They were drunk, they got into an argument, and allegedly they took cowboy boots. even really nice cowboy boots wouldn't rise to the level of a felony under the Major Crimes Act. And what that is it gives the FBI jurisdiction. So the FBI had no jurisdiction in the theft of a pair of cowboy boots. But the FBI claimed to have a warrant, which nobody's ever seen. So we don't know if it was ever actually issued for the theft of these cowboy boots. And in that atmosphere, they sent two agents in two separate cars into that AIM encampment that they had described. The FBI had actually described this encampment as a heavily armed camp with bunkers. And the bunkers were actually Inipi sweats. But the FBI called it. So into that, in their mindset, they're going into this heavily armed camp with bunkers. They send two guys. The two guys show up. Gunfire is exchanged. You can dispute whoever fired first, but they fired. People came running out of their tents and returned that fire to the FBI. The two FBI agents were killed in the gun battle, along with a Coeur d'Alene native brother who was 19 at the time, named Joe Kilswright Stuntz. In the aftermath, immediate wake of the shooting, which happened early afternoon, they had 300 FBI agents at that site, including a SWAT team, within minutes, 30 minutes. And anyone that's been out to Pine Ridge knows that, that it's a 2-hour drive and a good day with no traffic to Rapid City, which usually the Rapid City office usually has about 12 agents. So how they managed to get 300 agents there, they had to have been pre-staged. And a lot of people believe that the only reason you would send two guys into an encampment that in your mentality is the FBI is a heavily armed camp with bunkers is that you wanted the shootout and that these guys were coming. If you look at the transcripts, one of the agents spends a lot of time saying, come on guys, we're under fire, which leads me to believe at least that he was expecting this backup to show up, and it didn't. After the shootout, they got away, and Dino Butler and Bob Robidoux were tried in Cedar Rapids. They asked for a change of venue from Rapid City, which is where the case should be tried, to Cedar Rapids. When they got to Cedar Rapids, they were allowed to present all the testimony of the sorry, I have dogs. The reign of terror. And they were acquitted by an all-white jury in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, of killing two FBI agents. And they were acquitted on the basis of self-defense. And this infuriated the FBI. And the trial was somehow moved to Fargo. We still don't know how that happened. There was no motion that put it from the defense that asked for it to be changed to Fargo. And it would be highly unusual, and it's not even procedural for a prosecution to move the case. So how it ended up in Fargo in front of Judge Benson, who has his own problems with Indians, it got moved there. And Judge Benson did not allow any testimony about the reign of terror, the counterintelligence program against the American Indian movement, or allow Murder Porter to testify. So in that atmosphere, Leonard was convicted on 2 counts of murder of the 2 FBI agents. In subsequent appeals, things came out that the testimony of 3 teenage boys, they said they saw Leonard do it was false. They recanted, and they had been intimidated. We know that for sure now. We know they falsified ballistics testimony and ballistics evidence. All of that came out through Freedom of Information Act, and in subsequent appeals, the U.S. Attorney's position has changed to that Leonard was convicted of aiding and abetting, not necessarily the murder. They'll go back and forth, but in the appeal documents, they actually say that they were arguing for aiding and abetting, which is not what he was extradited for.
Mm-hmm. He went to Canada, didn't he?
Pardon?
He went to Canada?
Yeah, he had gone to Canada to address some native issues up there. I know there's a lot of people that say he kind of ran to Canada. Maybe in some sense he did, but he was up there actually. He wasn't hiding. He was up there working on some native issues at the small boy camp when the Royal Canadian Mounted Police got him and extradited him. And for those that don't know what the Myrtle Poor Bear case is, Myrtle Poor Bear is a emotionally disturbed lady with on the spectrum who was intimidated by the FBI. They terrified her. Her first affidavit essentially says, I wasn't there, I didn't see anything, I don't know what happened. And by the third one, and they gave all three of them to Canada. By the third one, there might even be four, but by the last one that they gave Canada, she not only was there, she was his girlfriend. She was forced to watch as he brutally executed the two FBI agents. And it's complete rubbish. She wasn't there. The FBI fingerprinted the entire thing, and not one single fingerprint comes up for Myrtle Poor Bear. She probably was in Rapid City. She was also used, interestingly enough, in two other trials against AIM members, saying that she was their boyfriend and she witnessed whatever that particular crime was, probably most famously in the trial of Dickie Marshall for the murder of Martin Montague in the Scenic Bar. She was claimed she was there and she saw it. So she was a go-to person that they knew they could intimidate, and they used her affidavits. Interestingly enough, when it came to the trial and the defense wanted to call her to the stand, the prosecution objected, and the judge did not allow her to take the stand. So that's kind of where Leonard's case is. He's had several appeals. One of them, Judge Haney, said that he felt it was a tough decision, but he felt he had to side with the government, but they should let Leonard out. We now know that at least Judge Haney, and we suspect all the judges in that appellate court, had been visited the night before their decision by the FBI. We have not been able to get the 302 or the report they did, but we know that they visited Judge Haney at least, if not all the judges. And we can only guess what that conversation was. I mean, this is an agency that had 3,000 protests in front of the White House while on duty.
What is AIM?
That's a loaded question.
Sorry, old boy.
The American Indian movement, I see it as two things. One, it's a movement that's existed since, Columbus landed. Hatui and Tashumpo and Geronimo were part of that American Indian movement, the movement of resistance to push for sovereignty, civil rights, human rights, treaty rights, those things. There's also the organization that was founded in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with Clyde and Harold Goodsky, who just passed away, and Dennis Banks, those guys up there in Minnesota, Pat Bellinger, and all of those people. And it's basically a movement that is based in the traditional, supporting the traditional ways of indigenous peoples, but also the civil, human, treaty, and sovereign rights of indigenous peoples.
Yes. So, you yourself with AIM, what did you do?
We, down here in Florida, I hooked up with people that were part of it, what was called then Dakota AIM, that did the Camp Yellow Thunder occupation liberation, however that's going to be viewed. And when I moved to Florida, we started a Native student group at the University of South Florida, because there wasn't one anywhere, and I was part of helping put that together. And in doing that, there was a brother by the name of David Goyette, who was Ganawage Mohawk, and he wanted to start an AIM chapter, and he prevailed on me, and we connected with both Aaron Tuelk and Billy Tyak up in Maryland, and began working towards building a forwarding, which we had from 1986 to 2006 here in Florida. And I was the executive director, was my hoo-ha title, but basically the only reason that existed was we had 4 co-coordinators, and when we incorporated to get grants, the format didn't allow for that. So we had one of us became the chairman and the other one became something else, and I got the title of executive director because they figured I was on the hot seat anyway, so they just gave me that. So we did a lot of different things when we were here, mostly around burial issues and working with the group called the Independent Traditional Seminoles, who are separate from the Seminole Tribe of Florida and the Miccosukee Tribe of Florida. The independent traditionals don't recognize the authority of the United States government over them. And they live over in Immokalee, near Immokalee, Florida. It's a place called Sunnyland, in a completely traditional format.
How old were you when you first heard about Leonard and his plight?
I would say I was probably a teenager, maybe 12 or something. I mean, I was aware of it when it happened. I don't know if I had the full portent because I was a kid. As I got older and looked at his case, it became more incensing, especially having studied some law. I mean, I didn't graduate law school or anything, but I did. You know, I have worked as a paralegal and I have studied some law. And looking at his case, it's probably one of the most egregious cases you could possibly find. However, it's not unique. I mean, if you look at the history of the American Indian movement or the Black Panthers or any dissenting movement in the United States, this is what has been done to the people in those groups. I mean, if you look at Russell Means, who I see have a really cool, I don't know if that's a picture or a painting, but it looks good from here. You know, Russ Dennis's trial in St. Paul for Wounded Knee, had there not been an informant that they exposed for rape in Wisconsin, they wouldn't have found the buds in Judge Nichols' chambers. And those guys probably would have gotten convicted in those leadership trials. That break helped them. If you look at Paul Durant and Richard Mohawk's trial, the Mohawk's Sky Horse trial in California, if the guy hadn't been drunk on the stand and admitted to killing the cab driver, those 2 guys would have gone to jail. They were railroaded. And they did the same thing to Leonard, but Leonard never got that break. You know, they made sure that he didn't get the benefit of the doubt or a break. If you look at his trial, there's not a single piece of evidence that Leonard is guilty. They can't even tell you what caliber bullet hit those 2 agents, because the initial autopsy that was done shows that there were 7 fragments in one guy and 14 fragments in the other. The bullets had fragmented so much that the medical examiner that did the first autopsy said he could not tell you with certainty what caliber it was. It was after they paid Noguchi, who was the Los Angeles medical examiner at the time, to come in and testify without ever examining the bodies or looking at the original autopsy. He, on his own, magically said, well, it was a .223 caliber bullet. And that way they could use that to try to lock Leonard into the case. So from top to bottom, Leonard's case is a litany of fabrication and fraud.
It's a farce.
It is. I mean, there's no, I mean, I think most people know about the murder forebear affidavits, you know, and just that by itself should have gotten Leonard acquitted, that they went to the lengths of that, that they put a individual in the cell with Dino Butler, and then him out, claimed that the guy, that Dino had somehow told the guy exactly everything that happened so they could get convictions, like Dino would do that. You know, all these kind of machinations that go on throughout the entire set of this. I mean, Russell Redner and those guys that got stopped in Oregon, they had weapons with them. The Oregon State Police melted them. Leonard was with those guys. So, Leonard was a Marine. If you think about it. And one of the mantras of a Marine is, my rifle is my life and my friend. And if you think that Leonard gave somebody else's rifle, is kind of funny. You would think he would keep it. Well, if he kept it, it would have been one of the ones in Oregon, and it was melted, right?
Yeah.
So why didn't they test them? Why haven't we ever gotten the ballistics on the other weapons that were at Oglala that day? I presume that the feds did ballistics on those weapons. They did ballistic tests, including there was a .22 Magnum found near the bodies, which, if you look at the initial autopsy, it said the range of gun could be from a .22 to a .30-aught. They never tested them, or they never gave them to Bruce Ellison or any of those guys. So if that's the case, why haven't they given us that information? Why are they still holding 10,000 pages of information?
I don't know. Is it political?
Pardon?
Is it political?
I think it's political. I think it's part of the dominant society's government's wish to have an example. I mean, if you look at Standing Rock, what they did to Red Fawn, they had a FBI informant pose as her boyfriend who planted a gun on her, and then when she's out peacefully protesting, she's accosted by dozens of Morton County Sheriff's deputies, and the gun that's in her pocket that her boyfriend planted allegedly goes off, and then she's charged with assault on police officers. And she's doing 7 years right now. She's in prison.
Oh.
Why does Michael Cohen get out on a COVID mercy, whatever you want to call it, from the CARES Act, but Leonard's still in there? So yeah, I think it's got politics behind it. I think it's got colonialism behind it. I think it's got all that stuff going on behind it.
When was he put in prison?
When was he put in prison?
When?
1976.
Oh, and it's now
since 1976.
Oh,
yeah.
How long is that from now?
I think it's 44 years.
44.
Years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he's been in way too damn long, and what's interesting about that point is that James Reynolds, who was actually the U.S. Attorney for Iowa, at least the Eastern District of Iowa, he is the one that was overseeing those attorneys that prosecuted Leonard. And he came out in 2012, I think, maybe a little later. I don't know. I'm fuzzy on the year, but he came out during the Obama administration, and he wrote Obama a letter saying that Leonard should be out. Mm-hmm. And that the FBI may have stretched the truth here and there, but irregardless, enough time has passed, let him out. And that's pretty powerful to have a prosecutor say that, enough is enough, let Leonard out. And he's been in there 44 years. He's a 75-year-old.
And the FBI want to save face, so they keeping him in.
He was, in the coldest analysis of this, he was the one that was left. Somebody in their mind had to pay for that crime.
Scapegoat.
And Dino and Bob were acquitted, and they couldn't place anyone else down there at the car other than Joe Stuntz, who was deceased. So Leonard's it. They had to, and there's even an FBI document that says that they have to throw the full weight of the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office at convicting Leonard.
Oh.
And he did.
It's so not right. It's so not right.
No, it is not right. And Leonard should be out, especially with this COVID. I know I'm jumping ahead on this, but especially with this COVID thing, Leonard is a guy who's 75 years old. He has diabetes. He's had a quadruple bypass. He has a bad hip. He has aortic aneurysm. He has ocular degeneration in his eyes. He's got a lot of issues. And he is no threat to anybody at his age, and he should just be let out. You know, I mean, there's absolutely no benefit to society at all by keeping Leonard Peltier in jail. They just keep him in there as a symbol.
Brother.
What year did that take place, Sheridan, and with the FBI agent?
The incident of Oglala was in 1975, June 26, 1975.
Okay, just to put it in perspective. And, you're now head of the organization that is trying to get Leonard released. This has been an ongoing project, I know, for a long time, for Leonard to see justice and get out of prison. And, he's become, a champion of human rights, a very elegant writer, and a wonderful artist.
Yes, his artworks. Let's talk about his artworks. Have you seen, Terry, some of his pictures that he's painted?
Yeah, I've seen his artwork. It's beautiful, and he just needs to get out of prison. This is a terrible injustice. Every American should be ashamed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think people need to realize the machinations, for lack of a better word, or whatever it is you want to call it, of keeping Leonard in jail, and that Leonard is in jail as an example of what happens to people that stand up. I mean, they just did the same thing to Red Dawn Fallis. Look at what they did to Geronimo Pratt. He was a Black Panther. He was in Oakland at the time of a murder in Los Angeles. The FBI knew it because they had an informant in the room with him in Oakland at a meeting, and they had a copy of the wiretap of someone that called into the meeting. Yet he spent 33 years in jail until, under a Freedom of Information Act, they got a hold of that information that the FBI knew he was in Oakland when the murder happened in LA. They do things like that, and it's sad. It's wrong. I think most Americans may be ignorant of that, but they do that, and and some of these guys like Mumia and Leonard and Rotula Shakur and Oscar, Red Fawn, they're in there. They're in bad health. They're in these warehouses, and right now none of them were sentenced to death. But if they get this COVID in the jail, I really fear for them. Any of them, including Leonard. And Leonard's case is one of the most egregious because you can look at the evidence and there isn't a shred of it that he did the thing that they're claiming he did. And, to some of us, even if he did, and I'm not saying, he didn't do it, but even if he did, it was an act of war. I mean, you had these FBI agents with a warrant they didn't have, somewhere they shouldn't be, in a place they had no jurisdiction, attacking a community. And communities have a right to defend themselves, and that's why Dino and Bob were acquitted. So if you're going to acquit Dino and Bob, there's absolutely no reason to have Leonard sitting in a jail cell for a non-crime.
Are there other Native Americans in jail that should not be?
Yes. You have, most famously right now, you have Red Fawn from Standing Rock. You have a group of people from Standing Rock, the Water Protector Legal Collective. Interestingly, Bruce Ellison, who defended Leonard, is one of the attorneys, are working on getting those people out. And they've had some good success at getting a lot of them out of jail. But a lot of those guys that were at Standing Rock got ridiculous charges for a nonviolent, peaceful protest. Red Fawn's in jail for 7 years because her boyfriend planted a gun on her. And turns out her boyfriend was an FBI informant. So you have that going on, yeah.
How do you reach out to the public about this injustice? Besides,
How do you reach out to the
how do you reach out?
through things like what you're doing here, which is great, allowing us to have a forum to tell people about it. Thank you for that. We do different events all over the country. Paulette Dete, who's Bob Robidoux' widow, is the director for the Defense Committee, was recently in Chicago at an art show of Leonard's art, and Chase Iron Eyes was there, and they did an event. Dave Hill has done events in Los Angeles. So there's events going on all over the place to try to raise awareness. I think there's a lot of despair in Leonard's case because he's been in for 44 years. I know when we did events in the 90s, there were larger crowds and there was a lot more energy. And I think we've got to find a way to get that energy back because we can't. I think the worst crime would be to let Leonard die in there. He should be able to go out and see his grandkids that he's never met.
See the sky and the green grass and the hills.
Exactly. He should be able to go home to Turtle Mountain and see his family. One of the things that I'm happy that I was able to do is help Paulette get down here to Tampa because we now have a Defense Committee house here. The Defense Committee had been in Fargo. And this way, his family, like his aunts and some of his cousins and his lifelong brothers in the movement, they don't have to fly to Florida and then get a hotel room, go over there. They can find their way to Florida, but we've got a place for them to stay, which makes it easy. It's gotten more visits because of that, and it's not a huge thing, but it's something that can help him with his spirits, at least, that he can see people like Edgar Bear Runner, who's been out here a couple times, or his Aunt Carol, who's been out here several times now. And we've been able to do that because she doesn't have the added expense of a hotel room. So he's able to, see some people that he didn't get to see before for a long time since he's been housed this far. That's another thing. He should be much closer to his family. They could easily move him to Oxford in Wisconsin. He would be much closer to his family, and it wouldn't be such a hardship for them to come down and see him. But they've, as like a punishment, put him as far away from his family as I think they could. I don't know if they have another prison further away. Here in Florida.
You have a website and Facebook site for this, for your group.
Yeah, you can go to www.whoisleonardpeltier.info. That's the website. You can see his art there. And if you can't afford the art, we have prints and things that people can purchase of his that goes to his legal defense. We have a team of lawyers working somewhat tirelessly to help Leonard get out, looking for avenues for that. There's some hope that the current president's disdain for the FBI may somehow lead to him giving an honest look at the clemency. Many people that were around in the 90s remember the real hope that we had back then that Clinton would do it, and then he let us down and didn't. And there was some hope that Obama would do it, since he let out Oscar, and then he didn't do it. So, but the FBI was intimidating those people, or the FBI was using its G-man reputation to get them to not let Leonard out. And in this case, this current administration despises the FBI. So there's a modicum of hope that might happen.
So you became president of International Leonard Peltier Defense Committee.
I'm the president of the board. After I helped them move down here, Paulette got me on the board. The board voted to have me on the board. And then through a series of events, I ended up as the board president, which basically means I wash the windows and I get people coffee. It's not all that important.
Does Jean Roach help you?
I get to be involved in it.
Does Jean Roach, is she in Florida?
No. Jean Roach is in Rapid City.
Oh.
She's on the board.
Okay.
She's been an integral part of the board. She did United Nations presentation last year, I think it was.
Mm.
It was great. I met with Hugo Chavez and those people. And then, or not Hugo, but I can't think of his name, but the other guy. Him and some other people to Evo Morales to pursue Leonard's case internationally. So she's done a lot of good work with the defense committee. She's been with it on and off since it started.
I hear there is a movie on your website, the website itself, about Leonard Peltier.
Yeah, there's. I don't know which one they put up. There's two documentaries that have been done. Most people that know Leonard's case are aware of Incident at Oglala, which is an awesome documentary. There was a documentary done almost at the same time by a lady by the name of Susie Bear that focuses more on Leonard's family. I think that's the one they put up. It's called Warrior. It's a great documentary. I think people should look at both to get a full picture of Leonard's case. The book In the Spirit of Crazy Horse is an incredible resource for people that don't know anything to learn about Leonard's case and what's going on with it.
You got loud dogs there, kiddo.
I know. You got people mowing lawns and butterflies going by. They're just going to bark at them.
Is Leonard himself getting worse?
His health is getting worse over time. Yeah, I mean, he's the Bureau of Prisons is probably not the best place to try to get medical care. He has a lot of things that need medical attention, and it's hard for us to keep track of it. They used to give us the medical records. All we needed was a HIPAA release, which Leonard gladly gives us. But now they're requiring a Freedom of Information Act suit to get any of his medical records. For example, they found some spots on his in his lungs and on his kidney, and we don't know what those are, and Leonard doesn't know what those are, and they're not telling him. And we asked for the medical records, and we're having to actually have one of his attorneys do a Freedom of Information Act release to try to get that information, and that's going to take us about a year. So health-wise, he's not getting any better. He's 75.
With the coronavirus.
Yes. Yeah, the coronavirus is a very scary thing for any inmate. If you look at what's happening across the country with inmates, once it gets into a facility, it kind of goes through the facility, just like it does the adult living facilities and the group homes and things like that. So there's a lot of concern for Leonard relating to COVID. And Bill Barr, the U.S. Attorney, sent out a letter to the Bureau of Prisons, which we've got a copy of, that outlines the regulations for releasing prisoners to home confinement. They're not letting them go. They're sending them to home confinement. And Leonard meets all the criteria. They have to be over 65. They have to have health conditions that are considered at risk for COVID, which Leonard has plenty. They have to have a low score on something they call a pattern test, which basically is looking at stuff over the last 15 years for that inmate. And Leonard's been pretty much an ideal inmate. I mean, he keeps to himself. He does his art. He helps people. He doesn't do anything.
And they still won't let him go.
As of now, no. We know that they've let out several hundred inmates, apparently including Michael Cohen, but they have not let Leonard out. And as far as we know, they haven't let anyone out at either of the two maximum security facilities at Coleman, which are Coleman 1 and 2. They also don't have any COVID at Coleman 1 or 2, but they do have it at the complex. Coleman is a multi-prison complex. It's one of the largest in the country. And they do have a COVID outbreak at the low security FCI and at the women's work camp And then, fortunately, the women's work camp is where they also had an outbreak of Legionnaires earlier this year. So that poor place, they should have just let all those people go because it's a work camp. They can come and go in. But Leonard has not been let out. We've asked people to write letters to the Bureau of Prisons and to the warden and whoever else to try to get them to release Leonard to home confinement at Turtle Mountain. He has a place to stay. He meets every criteria they have. And out of, just for humane reasons, they should let Leonard.
Is this prison, what's the prison's called that he's in?
The Bureau of Prison that Leonard is in is called Coleman United States Prison 1. It is one of 2 high or max security prisons at the Coleman Federal Correctional Complex, which is a massive complex that has work camps, low, medium, and high security prisons.
Are they on lockdown?
They have been on lockdown since the end of February, which really stinks because Leonard we were able to see Leonard 3 times before that lockdown, because before that they had a 3-month-long lockdown over a dispute between 2 people at the facility. So he has been locked down a lot this year, the last 12 months. But they've been in lockdown since February. Initially, it was more of a lockout. The prisoners could do whatever they wanted. You just couldn't have visitors. But in recent weeks, Leonard's reporting they've turned it into a lockdown where they're allowed out of their cell a couple times a week to shower, maybe go see the art room or something, and then go back. Leonard's in a better condition than some for that because he does not have a cellmate, and he's in an elder unit, so it's not as densely populated, but it's still densely populated as a prison. And we have very much concern for Leonard being in there during a COVID outbreak.
Terry, you got some more questions?
Well, I just want to thank Sheridan for the work he's doing to make this injustice as good as it can be, good in the sense of getting Leonard out of prison where he should never have been in the first place. And I have a little bit of contact with Leonard. I did a show where he called in from Leavenworth live. One of the best things I've ever done in the show was live. And you know a lady named Yvonne Bushy?
Yeah. She's done a lot of good work for Leonard.
But she was involved, I forget her title, but she came to Fort Wayne and was on the show, and she was instrumental in getting Leonard to be able to call in from the prison to our show. And it was a very memorable experience. And again, I want to thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you for the interview you did with Leonard. That's great. We can't do that so much anymore. The prisons are, they won't allow media in, and you have to be real delicate with the phone calls that he makes out, because if they realize that it was done as an interview, then he ends up in the shoe.
Oh, man.
So we try to limit that and make sure that it's done like in a paper format, and he answers questions. So any of those that were done before they started doing that, I think about 2010, is awesome that was done, because there's nobody better to get Leonard's case out there than Leonard.
How can we reach Leonard to say we're here for him? Letters? What?
Yes, you can write him letters. I don't have the address right now. I can send it to you so you can get it out to your listeners or viewers. But you can write to him at Coleman using his inmate register number 89637-132. You have to do it on white unlined paper, and you have to send it in a white envelope with no stickers on it. They've become very strict about what can be mailed into a prison. A lot of people like to send in postcards, and that's great, but they're going to come right back to you. And if they don't come back to you, they end up coming to the Defense Committee. We have bags and bags of mail for everybody gets out of people that have mailed him stuff, pictures, cards, and things. The only thing you can get is white unlined paper in a white envelope. They open everything you mail to him, and they read it. And because he's a high-profile prisoner, it is every letter. It's not random. They open every single piece of mail he gets before he gets it.
The FBI made him a high profile. He didn't do it himself.
No, he did not. But they consider him a high-profile, high-security risk, which is
That's their word.
absolutely stunning to me. When you meet him now and you go to see him, I mean, he takes a while to walk over to the room where we meet him at because we had legal visits. I don't see how he's a high-security risk at all. But that's how they've classified him, unfortunately.
What are you looking forward to see in the future?
I'm hoping he gets out. I really am. I hope that the efforts that some of the attorneys are making with the Trump administration pan out. I'm not going to bet on it, but I can hope for it. I'm hoping the government has some common sense and lets a lot of these guys, including Leonard, out over the COVID. The United States, I don't think people realize, the United States has 4 times the amount of prisoners as China.
Nope.
China has a lot more people than we do. We have 4 times as many people behind bars as China. We have twice as many people behind bars as Russia. And these are 2 countries that the United States considers repressive, yet we have more people behind bars. I think a lot of them need to be out, especially Leonard. But it's just part of the whole system and the way of thinking that has to change.
So much for the land of the free, eh?
Yeah, exactly. I think too many people buy into a lot of the illusions about America, and it's sad, And I think that people and I think COVID is a clarifier in some ways, because it's showing the disparities in the society and the healthcare system in the United States and the way we treat our prisoners. A lot of other countries are letting their prisoners out for the most part, and we are clinging to them and keeping them in jails. Florida's had, the state of Florida, the state prisons, have had some horrendous outbreaks in some of our prisons, and they're not letting them out. And our immigrations and customs enforcement was lying and saying nobody had it. And the reason that they were able to do that was if someone had it, they would drive them to a hospital, drop them off, and release them, so that officially they did not have a prisoner with COVID. They got caught, so now we know they have 200 some odd inmates in Florida in immigration detention centers with COVID.
Man.
These kind of things are going on, and I think people need to realize that. And I think when you realize all of that in its totality, you come to the conclusion that guys like Leonard should never have been in there, as he said, and they should be out. Not just for COVID, for any reason. They absolutely shouldn't have been behind bars.
Terry, what do you have to say? This is going towards the end of the show.
Well, again, to thank Sheridan, this has been ongoing for Leonard for a long time. When he called into my show, he was in Leavenworth, a federal pen in Kansas. So obviously they tightened the restrictions on him and made it even worse. And as you pointed out earlier, they put him as far away from his family as you can get and still be in the United States. So your work is very important, and whatever we can do to help, we will, surely.
Thank you. Yeah. It's going to take everybody getting them out of there, I can tell you that.
How can you encourage our listeners?
I encourage listeners? Well, I think the first thing that your listeners, and I say this a lot of times when I talk in public about anything, is that, I had the privilege of working through the American Indian Movement and Treaty Council of meeting indigenous peoples from all over the place, all over the world, whether it was North America, South America, Africa, or Vietnam. And when you talk to indigenous peoples and you ask them what they call themselves, because the names that they give people in the dominant society, whether it's Sioux or Navajo, is not the name of the people. And when you ask the people what they call themselves, whether it's Salagi or Lakota or whatever, it comes back to some variation of the human beings, the people. And I think we need to, as a society, as America or whatever, get back to realizing that first and foremost, we're human beings. And when you realize you're a human being more than you're an American or a Canadian or whatever those things are, and you have a understanding of your responsibility and your interaction, not only with other human beings, but creation in the world. And you realize those things, you have a responsibility as a human being to use your power. We've misperceived power in this society. We see the police car going by as power. We see the government as power. They're just authority, and they only have power because we give it to them. Power is Hurricane Andrew. Power is COVID, right? Power is a river. Power is a tree. Power is us. And we as human beings need to use our power constructively to help other human beings. And in the case of Leonard Peltier, there's a human being who did nothing but stand up for other human beings, who's been left as a prisoner of war of human beings against the predator. And I think we as human beings need to not leave those people on the battlefield. We need to go back and get them. And I think that as human beings, we need to stand up and do whatever it is we can to get Leonard out. If all you can do is write a letter and send it to him every day to keep his spirits up, do that. If you want to write your congressman, do that. If you want to form a support group and come up with ideas and demonstrating in the streets and doing whatever, do that. Contact us. But understand that that's our responsibility as human beings, is to stand up for people like Leonard, people like Red Font, who stood up for the human beings, stood up for all of us, and are paying the price for that.
More power to you, brother. We love you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being part of us, and we being part of you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Ciao.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Pleasure to meet you over the phone.
Thank you.
Hold on. This is for Leonard Peltier. Many moons ago, something had happened. What had transpired during those dreadful hours? The days that led up to horrible slaughters. Whose fault was it? People had asked why. In the end, Leonard was a Peltier for this ultimate lie. When will they let Peltier go? His hands are as clean as snow. Why are they holding him so? Will we ever know? Oh, Leonard Peltier, we're with you, son. Hold on. Ever since the settlers came forth in wagons, there was trouble with both races since day one. When the dust had settled, many lives were lost. And the precious lands the natives once held were no longer theirs to be hunting grounds. When will they let Leonard Peltier go? His hands are as clean as snow. Why are they holding him so? Will we ever know? Oh, Leonard Peltier, we're with you, son. Hold on.